I'm Ilyan Saint-Hilaire, and in this video we're going to talk about Intel MEI and LMS, two technologies that are related to Intel Active Management technology. If you've heard about Intel AMT or Intel Active Management technology, you'll know that it's a remote management technology that's built into the hardware, so you don't need software or OS assistance to manage a device remotely. And this comes handy in many different ways. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about, very quickly about AMT, just to recap, but I want to focus on how AMT talks with remote management tools and how it talks locally on the platforms to local tools that you may be running on the same platform as Intel AMT. So I'm just going to start with a basic slide. I have a picture of a motherboard, and I just want to illustrate here that basically AMT runs in a management engine chip, and the chip is on the right here underneath this heatsink. So you'll find usually the processor is pretty much in the center of the motherboard, and you'll have RAM over here, and you'll have like some power supply stuff over here and extra cards, and you'll have your I/O. But this chip, which is usually has a heatsink on it or some kind of cooling, this has basically, it's called the PCH, and it has the function of interacting with all the I/O or a lot of the I/O and the motherboard and the CPU. And this is where the management engine resides. And the interesting thing is when the motherboard is in soft off, so it's mostly sleeping, the RAM will be off, the CPU will be off, but this chip, part of it will be on, and the Ethernet adapter will be on and communicating to that. And so, and even, by the way, the management engine chip can be off itself. So only the Ethernet can be on. And then when it receives traffic that is for AMT, it will wake up this chip to actually process it. So there's a little bit of RAM in here, just enough to run the management stuff. And then if the console or the management tool says wake up the entire platform, then obviously we can wake it all up. So anyway, what I want to focus on this video is especially the interaction between the management engine and the local CPU and how that works. So if you're remote, you can basically access a remote port, and then there are filters in the Ethernet adapter that will route the traffic to the management engine. And so instead of going to the CPU, it's going to go there and get processed. So basically, there's some filters that filter out some of the ports so that when you try to connect to those ports, it never goes to the operating system. It will go to the management engine chip. But how does this interaction between the management engine and the CPU happen? Like, how does this work? And so I picked up this little graphic here, but again, you basically have the network here that has management traffic that hits the wired or wireless interface, and then it gets routed to Intel ME and Intel AMT, which is software basically running on the management engine right here. But how does this work between the operating system and the management engine? Well, let's take a look at that. So first of all, the super important part is that there is a driver that is loaded when you first install Windows. And so what you do is you go into your device manager right here, and then you will look at under System Devices, and you should see something called the Intel R Management Engine Interface, or Intel MEI. And so this is basically an interface that the management engine will present. And just be careful here. If you see this, it does not necessarily mean you have AMT. You may have a management engine, but it may not have AMT running, or it may have essentials, basically one of the other variants of AMT, or it may not have AMT at all. So this does not mean you have AMT necessarily. But if you have the Intel Management Engine interface up and running, then local tools can start querying the platform to see what features you have. Okay, and by the way, on Linux, this is /dev/MEI0. So if you have that folder on your Linux machine, then that's equivalent to this. Under older Linux, it was /dev/MEI, but under latest generations of Linux, it's mostly /dev/MEI0. Okay, so if you don't have this driver, you need to install it. Most of the time, it won't come directly when you install a fresh copy of Windows. If you have a really fresh copy, it will basically show the driver as being needed. But then if you connect to the internet and it updates all the drivers and stuff, that one will get loaded. Okay, so once you have this driver loaded, what can you do? Well, there's a tool we have. I'm going to go on to, I'm actually going to go on to MeshCentral.com. So I'm going to go MeshCentral.com. And if you go in the download sections, downloads on the bottom right, there's this tool called MeshCommand. And it's available in Windows, Linux, Windows, Linux, and ARM. But obviously, for our purposes, only Windows and Linux machines will have AMT. So you grab one of those and you download it. And I'm going to open my command prompt here. And I'm in the temp folder and I have MeshCommand, the 64-bit copy of it. So you can type MeshCommand 64, enter, and it will show you a bunch of things it can do. And a lot of it is AMT related on the bottom side here. So one of the first things you'll really want to take a look at is MeshCommand and AMT info. And this will show you the information about your AMT or your platform, whether it has AMT, what type of AMT it has. So here it says Intel AMT V9 030, activated in client control mode. And then it will give you the wired and wireless interfaces depending on what's connected, and then other things like serial connections and stuff. Now, what's happening here is that the MeshCommand tool is opening a connection into the MEI driver. So if I were to disable this, I won't, but if I were to disable this, then this tool won't work. Also, the MEI driver is only available if you're an administrator. So if I'm running as a normal user this shell here, then you may get an error basically saying cannot access the MEI driver. Make sure you are running as administrator. And this is because you need administrator privileges to set up that pipe between the software, in this case MeshCommand, and the MEI driver. Okay, now that's great. And with the MEI driver, you can pull information about your platform, the AMT state, and so on. Now, what you cannot do is you can't do any kind of TCP connection to Intel AMT locally if you have just this MEI driver. So let's see. For example, I could use MeshCommander. So this is the trusty Intel AMT tool. What you can do is you can set up localhost here and try to connect. And in this case, it's going to fail for me. Or what I can do is open a browser again. And what you can do is you can say localhost port 16992, which is the Intel AMT port. And in my case, it will fail. Now, the reason it will fail is because the operating system doesn't know what to do with this traffic. You basically are connecting to the network stack on the loopback interface, which is localhost, and the operating system does not know what to do. So in order to make local 6992, 6993, and basically the local TCP connectivity to the management engine, in order to enable it, you need some kind of software that will listen on these ports, on 6992, 6993, and so on, and it needs to take that traffic and forward it to the MEI engine, through the MEI, to the management engine through the MEI interface. So the tool to do that is called LMS. So if I go on Google, DuckDuckGo, I can type Intel AMT LMS. Hopefully I'll get some explanation here. Yeah, it's called a local manageability service. And this is a Windows service. So here there's some instructions here on events and so on. But basically this is a Windows service provided by Intel that you can install on your in your operating system. There is source code available on Linux, but it is not, widely. It's not available by default on Linux. You need to go and compile the source code and so on. And on Windows, it is also not installed by default. So unless your manufacturer of your computer has put it there, or with other drivers, but if you're just installing plain vanilla Windows, you will get this manageability engine driver, but you will not get LMS. So no LMS, you cannot connect to the manageability engine using the network sockets. You can't see the web page and so on. So let's see. I do have LMS on my other computer. So I am going to switch over here. So by the way, I have two computers. This is my developer computer, but on the bottom right or on my left here, I happen to have an AMT computer. And it's running Windows 11. So I'm going to go Control-Alt-Delete. I'm going to go in the Task Manager. And if you go in Services and type L for LMS, you'll see it right there. So it says LMS. And you can find it. Intel Manageability and Security Application Local Management Service. And so I'll turn this on. I'll hit Start. And then what I can do is open a web page. And I can go to localhost 6992. And you see the web page pop up. And if I disable this, I'll stop the service and hit refresh. Then it won't load anymore. And that's because this service is responsible for listening on loopback ports, and then taking the traffic from your browser, sending it through the MEI interface down to AMT, and obviously taking the responses back and sending it back up. So that's what it does there. Now, my experience is that a lot of people don't have LMS or don't install it. One thing that's super annoying about it is that there's no standard installer for it. So, it comes basically it's given to the manufacturers, and the manufacturers kind of bundle it in their support and driver websites with, bundles and so on. So what happens is that if you have lots of different computers from different manufacturers, going and getting LMS for all those computers can be quite annoying. So what happens is that on Linux, almost every Linux distribution will have let's see, I'll switch back here. So almost every Linux distribution will have /dev/MEI0. They all have, it's part of the basic Linux kernel. They all have the MEI driver. And on Windows, it comes with the vanilla Windows. So you most likely will have this driver there. But for LMS, you generally will not have it. So that's a problem that's faced whenever you're deploying software on AMT, is that you generally have MEI, but you don't have LMS. The way that MeshCentral solves this is that we built LMS into our agent and into MeshCommand. So for example, here if I go back to my web browser, I cannot access the port 6992 because I don't have LMS running. But if you type MeshCommand and you type MicroLMS, enter, then it will say setting up MEI, starting LMS. And actually what it's going to do is and obviously it's starting a micro version of LMS. What it's going to do is it's going to take a look to see if LMS is running, and if it's not, it's going to take over with its own copy. And so when I hit refresh here, boom, you see the web page of Intel AMT. And then I can log in, of course. Let's see if I can log in there. No. It doesn't really matter. Nope, I don't have the password. It doesn't matter. But if I had the password, I could log in here. That's not relevant right now. The idea is that I do have access to it. Also, you'll notice that if you run MicroLMS, then by default there's a MeshCommander on 16994. So if I type 16994 here, no index, there it goes. Then there's a special version of MeshCommander that's built into this LMS, and so it will tell you what status your AMT is in, if there's any notifications, and you can remotely log into this AMT from the local interface, and so on. So that's like a super extra bonus that you have if you run the micro version of LMS. Now, what's interesting now is that when you perform actions with MeshCommand, so MeshCommand has a bunch of AMT actions you can run, like getting the event log or so on. Some of these actions, actually a lot of them, either won't work remotely, Power won't work remotely, but some of these actions, like the event log, the audit log, and so on, these actions can work locally, but they do require that LMS be present. So MeshCommand will automatically, when you run any of these actions, MeshCommand will automatically look to see if LMS is running. If it's not, it will launch the MicroLMS, perform the operation, and then turn off again. But of course, you can run MicroLMS, by typing MeshCommand MicroLMS, and then you have that. Okay, so that's really nice because now you can run MeshCommand, get MEI information, perform like pretty sophisticated management operations, and you don't need LMS installed. The other thing I want to mention is that if I go back to my MeshCentral, so this is my MeshCentral test server, I can go to one of my machines like AMT 15 here, and I can click on console, and let's see, I can type info, I think that's it. And you'll see here it says built-in LMS disabled. So when you type info in the agent console tab, you can see if the agent's built-in MicroLMS or built-in LMS is currently active or not. Now, right now I have LMS active on the remote machine. I'll go to split screen here so you can see what I'm doing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop LMS here. I'm going to then go to the agent, I'm going to restart it. And now what should happen is that the agent should see, now it's going to reconnect here. The agent should see, wait a minute, LMS is not running. So if I type, it didn't detect it yet. Or I may have multiple agents here. But in any case, when it's necessary, then the built-in LMS will turn on automatically here. So that's really, really cool. Especially on Linux. If you're a Linux user, and you have an AMT platform, almost 99%, 100% chance your operating system will have the MEI driver. It will not have LMS. Installing LMS is a real pain if you're on Linux because you need to go compile the source code and do all this work. But if you just drop the MeshAgent and install it on your Linux machine, then the built-in LMS will just trigger and you'll have LMS for free as part of the agent. The other nice thing is once the agent is running and it's launching its own LMS, then any other application can access the local port. So as soon as I have a local agent launched, I can go to 16992. I can go to 16992 locally. I don't have it. I don't have the agent launched. Let me go and launch that just for kicks. I'm going to go to Task Manager, Service. I'm going to launch my agent here, and then hit refresh. And I should see the web page pop up. There it goes. So now the agent has launched LMS, and actually we can see it right there. Central and info. Built-in LMS. Whoop, there's something wrong here. But anyway, it did activate. So I do have LMS working. right here. And so now I can log in and do all the fun stuff I want to do. So if you have the agent running, the built-in LMS may run. Once the built-in LMS is run, it's not just that agent capable of talking to AMT through the network ports, local network ports. It is, of course, any other piece of software. You can run MeshCommander, you can run anything you want on that Linux machine, and just kind of use the MeshAgent or MeshCommand as your LMS. Anyway, hopefully that was useful. A lot of people have Intel AMT, they use it, but often they get into trouble. They're like, wait a minute, how come the web page is not showing up? They're assuming that there's a problem with the platform. Very often LMS is the missing link here. And so the nice thing to know is all the mesh agents and both on Linux and Windows, MeshCommand all come with LMS. So super, super practical, I think. Anyway, take care. Have a great day.